The artificial gravity on the USS Aegis created a false sense of normality that Captain Lyra Vega both appreciated and distrusted. Standing at the observation deck, her silhouette was framed against the infinite black canvas of space, punctuated by distant stars that seemed little more than specks of dust against eternity. Her reflection in the reinforced polymer glass revealed a woman in her early 40s, her dark hair tied back in a regulation knot streaks of premature silver, highlighting her temples badges earned from 15 years of deep space rescue missions. Captain, the ship's AI, announced its voice, calibrated to a tone that wouldn't startle. Maintenance reports. All repairs to the portside shield generators are complete. Lyra nodded, knowing the AI's sensors would register the acknowledgement. And the status of the crew rotation. Third shift has just begun. All departments reporting optimal efficiency levels. Her fingers traced the outline of the captain's insignia on her collar, a nervous habit she'd developed since taking command of the Aegis. 3 years aboard this vessel, and still the weight of responsibility pressed down on her with crushing force. Her previous command, the Stargazer, had been lost with 12 crew members during a rescue mission gone catastrophically wrong. The memories still visited her in dreams, explosions, the silent screams of those sucked into the vacuum, and her own powerlessness as she watched from an escape pod. The Helian galaxy stretched before her, a spiral of stars and nebulae that mankind had spent the last 3 centuries exploring, categorizing, and colonizing. The year 2474 marked humanity's most expansive reach into the cosmos, with settlements and outposts scattered across dozens of star systems. But even in this age of interstellar travel and advanced technology, there remained regions untouched by human presence. Dark, mysterious sectors, where ships disappeared without trace, where communications became garbled, and where the laws of physics themselves seemed to bend in unsettling ways. One such region loomed at the edge of the Aegis's current patrol route, a vast expanse of seemingly empty space, known simply as the Void. No official star charts acknowledged it by that name. In Alliance documentation, it was Sector ZX-419, an unremarkable designation for a remarkable anomaly. Among spacers, however, it had earned its more ominous moniker from the rumors that swirled around it, that it contained the fragments of destroyed galaxies, that it was a graveyard for civilizations that had reached too far, fallen too hard. Lyra didn't put much stock in spacer tales. 23 years traversing the black had taught her that most cosmic mysteries had perfectly rational explanations once you gathered enough data. Still, she kept the Aegis at a respectful distance from the Void's perimeter, as per Alliance protocols. The calm of the observation deck was disrupted by the sound of the door sliding open. Major Kai Malik, her second-in-command, stepped through with the precise movements of someone who had spent too much time in military service to ever truly relax. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying that distinct, clipped quality that had initially grated on Lyra, but which she had come to recognize as simply Malik being Malik. "Communications picked up something unusual." Lyra turned from the viewport, one eyebrow raised. "Define unusual, Major." Malik's dark features remained impassive, but she noticed a slight tension around his eyes. "A signal, Captain. Rhythmic pulses not matching any known Alliance or foreign communication patterns. It's coming from the edge of Sector ZX-419. The edge of the Void." Lyra felt a prickle of unease travel up her spine, but maintained her commander's composure. "Show me." Together, they moved to the bridge where the main operations center of the Aegis hummed with activity, despite the late shift. Screens displayed the ship's systems, external sensors, and communication arrays. All normal, except for the anomalous signal pattern being projected on the central holographic display. It began approximately 27 minutes ago. Communications Officer Morgan explained, her fingers dancing over the console. "At first, we thought it might be background radiation or sensor echo, but the pattern is too consistent." Lyra studied the rhythmic peaks and valleys of the signal. "Is it an SOS?" That was our first thought, Morgan replied, but it doesn't match any known distress protocol, human or otherwise. Dr. Arya Nakamura, the ship's signal specialist and xenocommunications expert, leaned forward in her chair, her eyes reflecting the blue light of the display. With her wiry frame and perpetually disheveled appearance, she looked more like an absent-minded academic than an Alliance officer. Lyra knew better. Beneath that exterior was one of the sharpest minds in the fleet. "It's not random," Dr. Nakamura said, her voice carrying the quiet certainty of expertise. "There's structure here. See these clusters? They repeat but with subtle variations. It almost reminds me of—" "Of what?" Lyra prompted. Dr. Nakamura frowned. "Neural patterns. Brainwaves, but not from any species I've ever studied." A chill silence fell over the bridge. Lyra felt the weight of every gaze waiting for her decision. The Alliance's directives regarding the void were clear: maintain distance, report unusual phenomena, but do not engage without explicit authorization from command. But if this was a distress signal, if someone was out there trapped at the edge of that mysterious expanse of space, then the Aegis had a duty to respond. It was, after all, a rescue vessel. "Plot a course," Lyra said, finally. "Bring us to the edge of the signal's origin point, but keep us outside the void's boundary." Malik stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Captain, with all due respect, Alliance protocols specifically prohibit—" "I am aware of the protocols, Major." Lyra cut him off, her tone, allowing no room for debate. "We're a rescue ship. We investigate distress signals. That's our mission." She turned to the navigation officer. "Proceed, Lieutenant Park." Half impulse. "Aye, Captain. Setting course." As the Aegis altered its trajectory, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was observing them, calculating their response. The sensation of being watched intensified as they approached the void's periphery, though sensor sweeps revealed nothing but empty space ahead. 6 hours later, the Aegis hovered at the coordinates where the signal originated, yet sensors detected no ships, no debris, no signs of life. Only the continuing pulse of that strange rhythmic broadcast emanating from just beyond the boundary, where regular space seemed to darken as if light itself hesitated to enter. "Full sensor sweep," Lyra ordered. "I want to know what's out there." The results came back almost immediately, and they were more puzzling than clarifying. The sensors detected what they termed a negative space anomaly, an area approximately 3 kilometers in diameter that didn't just fail to reflect signals, but seemed to absorb them entirely. A region darker than the vacuum surrounding it, with a density reading that made no sense given the absence of visible matter. "It's like a black hole," Ensign Toru muttered from his station, "except it isn't exerting any gravitational pull." "And it's the source of our signal," Dr. Nakamura confirmed, her voice tight with suppressed excitement. "Captain, this could be a completely new phenomenon, something beyond our current understanding of physics." Malik stood rigid beside Lyra's command chair. "Or it could be exactly why the Alliance warns against approaching the void," he countered. "Unknown phenomena are unknown for a reason. They haven't been classified, because they're unpredictable, potentially hostile." Lyra tapped her fingers against the armrest, weighing the risks. The rescue protocols were designed with known dangers in mind: asteroid fields, radiation storms, hostile vessels. This was something else entirely. "Launch a probe," she decided. "Let's get a closer look without risking the ship or crew." Engineer Jax Reynolds, who had been silently observing from his engineering station, nodded and began the preparations. Tall and lanky, with hands that seemed too large for his wiry frame, Reynolds had an uncanny ability to coax machinery into performing beyond its specifications. If anyone could modify a probe to gather useful data from that anomaly, it was him. "Probe ready for launch, Captain," Reynolds reported after several minutes of adjustments. "I've reinforced the shielding and added an extra power cell. Should give us about 30 minutes of transmission before the power runs out." "Proceed," Lyra ordered. The probe ejected from the Aegis's underbelly, a sleek metallic object, no larger than a shuttle escape pod propelled toward the edge of the anomaly by small thrusters. Its cameras transmitted real-time footage back to the ship, showing nothing but the star-flecked blackness of normal space, until it crossed an invisible threshold. The bridge crew collectively gasped as the probe's camera feed suddenly changed. Where there had been empty space, there now appeared a massive structure, or what remained of one. It resembled the skeletal hull of an ancient spacecraft, vast beyond comprehension, its surface covered in what looked like organic growth, a sort of luminescent moss that pulsed with ethereal blue light. "That's impossible," Malik breathed, his customary stoicism cracking. "That structure must be at least 20 kilometers long. How could our sensors not detect it?" Dr. Nakamura's fingers flew across her console. "The anomaly is bending light and other electromagnetic radiation around itself. It's essentially cloaked, but not through any technology I recognize." "Can you identify the structure?" Lyra asked, unable to tear her eyes from the haunting image. "Negative," Reynolds answered, analyzing the feed from his station. "It doesn't match any known ship design in our database. And those growths? They're not registering as any form of biological matter we've cataloged. They seem to be pulsing in rhythm with the signal." As they watched, the blue luminescence flickered, almost as if acknowledging their presence. The signal's pattern changed subtly, becoming more rapid, more insistent. "It's responding to us," Dr. Nakamura whispered. "The signal, it's changing because we're here." Before Lyra could issue new orders, a cry of alarm came from the security station. Lieutenant Commander Davenport, a veteran officer whose face rarely showed emotion, looked up with an expression of pure shock. "Captain Ensign Kepler is gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Lyra demanded, rising from her chair. "He was monitoring the secondary sensor array," Davenport explained, pointing to an empty station. "I turned away for maybe 30 seconds, and when I looked back, his station was empty. His communicator isn't responding, and internal sensors can't locate him anywhere aboard the ship." A chill descended over the bridge. People didn't simply vanish from starships. Every compartment was monitored, every entrance and exit recorded. "Security lockdown," Lyra ordered. "All personnel to report in and confirm their locations. I want a deck-by-deck search." As security protocols engaged, the ship's AI announced the lockdown, its calm voice at odds with the growing tension. Malik organized search teams with practiced efficiency, his earlier skepticism now channeled into decisive action. While the search for Ensign Kepler began, Lyra returned her attention to the probe feed and froze. The camera showed movement among the strange luminescent growths. Not the gentle pulsing from before, but deliberate, coordinated patterns that suggested intelligence. Shapes seemed to form and dissolve in the blue light too quickly to identify, but leaving the unsettling impression of faces pressed against a membrane watching. "Pull the probe back," she ordered, "now." Reynolds tried to comply, but the probe's thrusters failed to respond. "Something's interfering with the control signal, Captain. I can't." The feed abruptly cut to static, then returned, showing the probe spinning as if struck by an unseen force. For a brief moment, the camera captured what appeared to be a tendril of blue light, extending from the structure reaching toward the probe. Then the transmission ended entirely. "Probe lost," Reynolds reported grimly. At that same moment, the Aegis shuddered, a vibration that ran through the hull like a living thing. Every screen on the bridge flickered, and for an instant, Lyra could have sworn she saw patterns in the static, the same flowing ethereal shapes they'd glimpsed on the alien structure. "What was that?" she demanded. "Unknown energy surge," Toru reported, his voice strained. "It passed through our shields as if they weren't there." "The signal," Dr. Nakamura cut in, her face pale. "It's changed again. It's—" She hesitated, seeming reluctant to voice her thoughts. "Speak freely, Doctor," Lyra encouraged. "It's mimicking our ship's electronic signature," she said quietly. "Like it's learning about us." The implications hung in the air, unspoken, but understood by all, whatever entity generated that signal. It was no longer simply broadcasting. It was responding, adapting, potentially preparing. Malik returned to the bridge, his expression grim. No sign of Ensign Kepler, Captain. But we found this. He held up a communicator, its casing partially melted, as if exposed to intense heat. It was in the Environmental Control Room, Sector 7. The room shows signs of disturbance. Disturbance, Lyra echoed. The metal plating on one wall has been warped, Malik elaborated. As if something generating extreme heat passed through it. And there's this. He handed her a small device, Kepler's personal alarm standard equipment, for all Alliance personnel. Its emergency button had been depressed with such force that the plastic casing had cracked. Before Lyra could respond, another tremor ran through the ship stronger than before. The lights dimmed momentarily, and when they returned to full power, several crew members gasped and pointed toward the main viewport. Outside, in the void of space where nothing had been visible before, faint blue lights pulsed in patterns that mirrored the signal they'd been receiving. They moved with purpose, circling the ship like curious predators. Shields to maximum, Lyra ordered. Charge weapon systems. Captain, Malik cautioned. We don't know if those lights represent a hostile intent. We don't know that they don't either, Lyra countered. One of my crew is missing, potentially taken by whatever's out there. I'm not taking chances with anyone else. As if in response to her words, the blue lights intensified, converging into formations that began to take shape, cubic structures that rotated and transformed like three-dimensional puzzle boxes, rearranging themselves in space. They're beautiful, someone whispered. Lyra felt it too, a strange fascination with the geometric dance playing out before them. But beneath the aesthetic appreciation lurked instinctive warning signals. These patterns were too precise, too calculated. They weren't natural phenomena, but constructed communications or weaponry. All hands prepare for potential impact, she announced, just as the blue formations suddenly accelerated toward the ship. The shields flared as the first of the light constructs made contact, a brilliant flash of energy that momentarily blinded those watching through the viewport. The Aegis rocked violently, throwing several crew members from their stations. Shield integrity at 87%. Reynolds reported his fingers flying over his console to reroute power. Whatever these things are, they pack a punch. Evasive maneuvers, Lyra ordered. Get us away from the anomaly. Lieutenant Park engaged the impulse engines, but the ship responded sluggishly, as if moving through molasses rather than the vacuum of space. Something's interfering with the propulsion system, Park reported, frustration evident in her voice. It's like we're being held in place. Another impact shook the ship, more violent than the first. Warning klaxons blared as several systems reported damage. Shield integrity down to 63%, Reynolds called out. Power fluctuations in all major systems. Dr. Nakamura's voice cut through the chaos. Captain, the signal, it's changing again. It's becoming more complex, almost like it's trying different frequencies, searching for something. What is it searching for? Lyra demanded. I don't know, but... Dr. Nakamura's eyes widened. It's resonating with our ship's communication frequencies now. If it manages to match our internal systems... She didn't need to finish the thought. If whatever intelligence controlled those light constructs gained access to the Aegis's systems, they would be entirely at its mercy. Malik moved to Lyra's side, his voice low but urgent. Captain, we need to retreat. This isn't a rescue mission anymore. There's nothing here to save. Whatever this entity is, it lured us here. The signal was bait. Lyra realized the truth dawning with terrible clarity. Not a distress call, a trap. Exactly, Malik affirmed, and we walked right into it. Lyra made her decision. All power to engines. Get us out of here, maximum velocity. The ship lurched as Lieutenant Park channeled everything into the impulse drive. For a moment, the Aegis seemed to break free of the invisible hold, accelerating away from the anomaly and its strange light constructs. Then came the third impact, not against the shields, but somehow bypassing them entirely. The blue light suffused the bridge itself, flowing through solid bulkheads as if they weren't there. It coalesced into swirling patterns overhead, casting an otherworldly glow over the terrified crew. And with the light came sound, a high-pitched keening that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly through the bones of the skull. Several crew members doubled over, clutching their heads in pain. "It's inside the ship!" Davenport shouted, drawing his sidearm, a futile gesture, against an opponent made of light and sound. The entity for Lyra was now certain they faced a single intelligence, rather than multiple attackers, pulsed with increasing intensity. Screens throughout the bridge displayed impossible mathematics equations that seemed to fold in on themselves in non-Euclidean geometries. "It's accessing our computers," Reynolds reported, horror evident in his voice. "Corrupting our databanks. At this rate, we'll lose life support in minutes." Lyra's mind raced, searching for options. Conventional weapons were useless against this adversary. Running hadn't worked. What remained? "The signal," she said, suddenly turning to Dr. Nakamura. "You said it was like neural patterns, brainwaves." Dr. Nakamura nodded, wincing against the painful keening. "Yes, but not like any we've—" "Could we create a countersignal?" Lyra pressed. "Something that disrupts its patterns." Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes. "Theoretically, yes. If we could generate the right frequency, a destructive interference pattern. But we'd need to understand its neural structure better, and we have no way to—" Another violent shudder ran through the ship, and the lights flickered ominously. A console exploded in a shower of sparks, narrowly missing the officer stationed there. "Life support failing on decks 3 through 5. The AI announced, its voice distorting. "Emergency protocols engaged." They were running out of time. "The manual bridge," Lyra decided. "We need to get to the manual override systems." Deep within the Aegis, protected by layers of shielding and isolated from the main computer networks, lay an auxiliary control room designed to operate the ship's basic functions in case of catastrophic system failure. It was a relic of older vessel designs, maintained more out of tradition than practical necessity until now. "Malik with me," Lyra ordered. "Reynolds, do whatever you can to keep the shields up. Dr. Nakamura, I need you working on that counter-signal. Everyone else evacuate to emergency shelters." As the bridge crew moved to carry out her orders, Lyra and Malik fought their way through corridors increasingly suffused with the ethereal blue light. The entity seemed to be spreading throughout the ship, flowing through systems, corrupting data, shorting out equipment. In several sections, they encountered crew members frozen in place, their eyes wide and unseeing mouths open in silent screams, as tendrils of blue light wrapped around them like spectral cocoons. There was no time to help them. Lyra could only hope that breaking the entity's hold on the ship would free its hold on her people as well. The manual bridge was a cramped space, austere compared to the main bridge, with analog controls and basic displays. It represented technology practically ancient by current standards, but had one crucial advantage. It was hardwired, separate from the network systems the entity was corrupting. "Seal the door," Lyra instructed as they entered. Malik complied, engaging the mechanical locks that would hopefully keep the entity at bay for a short time. Lyra activated the manual communication system. "Dr. Nakamura, do you copy?" Static crackled. Then the doctor's voice came through, distorted but audible. "I'm here, Captain. The entity is everywhere, corrupting systems faster than we can isolate them." "Have you made any progress on the counter-signal?" "Some. I've been analyzing the pattern. It's bizarre. Not like anything in our records. But there's something familiar about it." Dr. Nakamura's voice became more urgent. "Captain, I think it's resonating with specific biological patterns. Human brainwaves, but inverted like a photonegative." "What does that mean?" Lyra asked, trying to bring the ship's basic functions online through the manual controls. "It means," Dr. Nakamura explained, "that it might be trying to synchronize with us, to establish some kind of neural link. And Captain, I think it already succeeded with Ensign Kepler." The implications were chilling. If the entity could link with human minds, take control of them, Can we use that, turn it against itself somehow? Lyra pressed, desperate for any advantage. There was a pause before Dr. Nakamura responded. Maybe. If we could generate a counter-frequency based on human neural patterns. Something that creates destructive interference. The medical bay, Malik suggested. They have neural scanners that could be modified to broadcast rather than receive. Get on it, Lyra ordered. Coordinate with Reynolds. I'll try to keep the ship functioning from here. As Malik departed, Lyra confronted the daunting task of manually piloting a vessel designed for computerized control. The entity's influence was spreading, manifesting as distortions in the displays and fluctuations in power that made every adjustment a challenge. Through the small viewport, she could see the blue lights swarming around the ship, probing, searching for weaknesses. The anomaly that had hidden the massive alien structure now seemed to be expanding, reaching toward them like a sentient darkness. Captain, Reynolds's voice came through the comm, strained with effort. We're rigging the neural scanners now, but the entity is adapting fast. It's like it knows what we're trying to do. Keep at it, Lyra encouraged. It's our only shot. A sudden pounding on the sealed door of the manual bridge startled her. Through the small window, she could see a crew member, Ensign Toru, from the main bridge, but something was terribly wrong. His movements were jerky, unnatural, and his eyes glowed with the same ethereal blue light as the entity. Sure. Captain Vega. He called, his voice overlaid with harmonics that no human vocal cords could produce. Why do you resist? We offer transcendence, knowledge beyond your comprehension. Who are you? Lyra demanded, keeping her distance from the door. What do you want? The thing wearing Toru's face pressed closer to the window, its expression a parody of human excitement. We are the remnants, the survivors, the last echoes of a civilization that reached too far and found what waits between the stars. The structure in the void, Lyra realized. That was your ship. Our prison, the entity corrected. Our tomb. Until your kind began to venture closer, broadcasting your presence across the void. We heard you. We called back. And now you will join us in eternity. The door began to vibrate as the possessed Toru applied inhuman strength against it. The metal buckled slightly at the edges. Captain, Reynolds's voice crackled through the comm. We're ready with the countersignal, but there's a problem. We can't broadcast it shipwide. The entity has corrupted too many systems. What do we need? Lyra asked, watching in alarm as the door buckled further. A direct neural interface, Dr. Nakamura cut in. Someone has to physically connect to the modified scanner and become the broadcaster. And the risks, Lyra already knew the answer, but needed to hear it. Unknown, Dr. Nakamura admitted. Best case, severe neural shock. Worst case. She didn't need to finish. Worst case was what had happened to Kepler, to Toru possession by an alien intelligence, older than human civilization. I'll do it, Lyra decided without hesitation. Captain, no, Malik's voice joined the conversation. The ship needs you in command. That's an order, Major. Lyra cut him off. Keep the ship together. I'm on my way to the medical bay. The door to the manual bridge gave another ominous creak. She needed to move quickly. Lyra accessed the emergency hatch in the floor, another anachronistic feature that now proved invaluable. It led to a maintenance crawlway that would bypass the main corridors where the entity's influence was strongest. As she descended into the narrow passage, the last thing she saw was Toru's possessed form, finally breaking through the door, blue light pouring in behind him, like liquid nightmare. The crawlway was claustrophobic and poorly lit emergency lighting, casting long shadows as Lyra made her way toward the medical bay. Several times she had to stop and recalculate her route, as she found sections flooded with the entity's blue light, or blocked by structural damage. All around she could hear the ship groaning metal, stressed beyond its tolerances systems, failing catastrophically. The Aegis was dying, and with it, her crew. Status report, she demanded through her communicator. Shield integrity below 20%. Reynolds responded, his voice barely audible through static. Hull breaches on decks 2 and 7. Emergency bulkheads holding, but not for long. Casualties. There was a pause before Malik answered, his tone carefully controlled. 37 crew members are compromised like Toru. 12 injured from structural failures. The rest are holding position in secure areas, but the entity is spreading. Lyra kept moving, pushing aside the guilt that threatened to overwhelm her. She had led them into this trap, ignoring protocols and warnings. Now, she would get them out or die trying. The medical bay was a scene of frantic activity when she finally arrived. Dr. Nakamura and Reynolds had transformed one of the neural scanners into something barely recognizable, a jury-rigged apparatus of exposed circuitry and improvised connections. "Will it work?" Lyra asked without preamble. Dr. Nakamura looked up, her face streaked with sweat and grime. "In theory. We've modeled the entity's signal structure and created an inverse wave pattern that should disrupt its cohesion. But the broadcast requires a living neural network as a conduit." "My brain as the transmitter," Lyra said grimly. "Essentially, yes. The scanner will use your neural activity as a carrier wave for the destructive interference pattern." Dr. Nakamura hesitated. "Captain, I need to be clear about the risks. This could cause permanent neurological damage, and if the entity realizes what we're doing, it might try to possess me directly," Lyra finished for her. "I understand." Reynolds stepped forward, concern evident in his expression. "There's something else you should know. We've identified what the entity responds to most strongly." He exchanged a glance with Dr. Nakamura before continuing. "It's human heartbeats. The rhythm of our cardiovascular system seems to disturb it. That's why it's trying to synchronize with our neural patterns to override that rhythm." A new possibility dawned on Lyra. "So if we amplify that rhythm instead of trying to counter the entity directly, we might be able to repel it," Dr. Nakamura confirmed. "But it would require an incredibly strong broadcast channeled through the ship's communication array, which is currently under the entity's control," Reynolds added grimly. Lyra considered the options, each more desperate than the last. "What if we use the emergency beacon? It's on a separate system with its own power source." Hope flickered in Reynolds' eyes. "That might work, but we'd need to reconfigure it to broadcast the specific frequency pattern, and someone would still need to serve as the neural conduit." "Then let's do it," Lyra decided. "How long to set it up?" 10 minutes, Dr. Nakamura estimated. "Maybe less if—" The lights flickered, and a low humming filled the air, the precursor to the entity's appearance. Blue luminescence began to seep through the ventilation ducts. "We're out of time," Malik announced from the doorway, phaser drawn. "It's found us." Lyra made an instant decision. "Malik, Reynolds, buy us time. Dr. Nakamura with me to the emergency beacon control room. Now." As Malik and Reynolds positioned themselves to defend the medical bay, Lyra and Dr. Nakamura raced through the increasingly compromised corridors of the Aegis. The emergency beacon control was located near the ship's core, protected by redundant shielding, designed to ensure it would function, even if the rest of the vessel was destroyed. They encountered 2 more possessed crew members en route, but managed to evade them in the confusion of flashing emergency lights and billowing coolant vapor from damaged systems. The control room was blessedly empty when they arrived, its systems still operational, despite the chaos engulfing the rest of the ship. "How do we do this?" Lyra asked, as Dr. Nakamura began rerouting connections with practiced efficiency. "I'm modifying the beacon to broadcast on a harmonic of the average human heartbeat," the doctor explained, her fingers flying over the controls. "But we need a strong, steady source, a living heart to provide the base rhythm." "Mine," Lyra said simply, already removing her uniform jacket, to allow access to the monitoring pads Dr. Nakamura would need to place. As the doctor worked attaching neural monitors and cardiac sensors to Lyra's temples and chest, the captain established communication with the rest of her team. "Malik's status." Static crackled. Then, "Holding position, but not for long. The entity is changing tactics. It's beginning to manipulate the ship's gravitational systems, creating localized distortions. We can't, his voice cut off in a burst of interference. Reynolds. Still here, Captain, the engineer responded, his voice strained. I've managed to isolate a few critical systems, but most of the ship is compromised. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Dr. Nakamura completed the final connections. Ready, Captain. Once I activate this, your heartbeat will be amplified and broadcast through the emergency beacon. The neural monitors will synchronize the pattern to create the disruptive effect we need. Side effects, Lyra asked, pragmatic to the end. Dr. Nakamura hesitated. Extreme strain on your cardiovascular system, possibly neural feedback leading to seizures, and the entity will almost certainly target you directly once it realizes you're the source. Lyra nodded, accepting the risks. Do it. With a final adjustment, Dr. Nakamura activated the modified beacon. Immediately, Lyra felt a strange resonance in her chest, as if her heartbeat was echoing through her entire body. The sensation spread outward, a pressure wave of physiological rhythm, channeled through technology she barely understood. On the monitoring screen, they could see the effect spreading through the ship, a new signal pattern overlaying the entity's blue luminescence, pushing it back wherever the two met. It's working, Dr. Nakamura breathed amazement in her voice. But the victory was short-lived. The entity, sensing the threat, redirected its attention. Blue light surged toward the control room with frightening speed, flowing through ventilation systems, electrical conduits, any path that would lead to the source of the opposing signal. It's coming, Lyra warned, feeling the pressure in her chest intensify as the beacon drew more energy from her vital signs. Dr. Nakamura worked frantically at the controls. I'm trying to increase the broadcast power, but the systems can't handle much more without... The door to the control room burst inward, torn from its hinges by an invisible force. Blue light flooded the chamber, coalescing into vaguely humanoid shapes that pulsed with alien rhythm. Cease, a voice commanded, not spoken aloud, but somehow projected directly into their minds. You damage the cohesion. Lyra grimaced through the increasing pain in her chest. Get out of my ship, she managed through gritted teeth. The entity surged forward, tendrils of light reaching for the beacon controls. Dr. Nakamura threw herself in their path, using her body as a shield. Increase the output, she shouted to Lyra. Your emotional state, fear, anger. It strengthens the rhythm. Understanding, Lyra focused on her rage at this entity that had invaded her ship, threatened her crew, violated the sanctity of human minds. She channeled every ounce of protective fury into her heartbeat, feeling it pound against her ribs like a war drum. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The beacon signal intensified waves of invisible force pushing back the blue light. The entity recoiled, its humanoid forms distorting, breaking apart, only to reform in more abstract, chaotic patterns. Pain. It projected the mental voice, now fractured, discordant. Dissolution. Why resist unity? Because we choose our own destiny, Lyra responded, both aloud and in her mind. We are not yours to take. The entity convulsed clearly, struggling against the amplified rhythm of her heart. But it was still powerful, still dangerous. A tendril lashed out, striking Dr. Nakamura and sending her sprawling against the far wall. Lyra was alone now, connected to the beacon, her life force the only thing standing between her crew and assimilation by an ancient, alien intelligence. Through the open doorway, she saw more possessed crew members approaching, their movements, jerky, uncoordinated, as if the entity's control was weakening, but still present. Captain, Reynolds's voice came through the comm, barely audible through static. The entity is retreating from some sections of the ship, but it's concentrating its energy toward your position. It's abandoning the periphery to focus on the threat. Can you get the main engines back online? Lyra asked, each word a struggle, as the strain on her system intensified. Working on it. Malik is helping reroute power. Good, Lyra gasped. When I give the signal, I want maximum thrust away from the anomaly. Get as much distance as possible. What about you, the beacon? I'll handle it, just be ready. The possessed crew had reached the doorway now, their eyes glowing with fading blue light. Behind them, more of the entity's energy was gathering, preparing for a concentrated assault. Lyra knew she couldn't hold out much longer. Already her vision was tunneling, darkness creeping in at the edges, as her overtaxed heart struggled to maintain the rhythm being broadcast. She needed a final gambit. With trembling fingers, she accessed the beacon's control panel. There was one setting she hadn't authorized Dr. Nakamura to use: the emergency overload. It would channel all available power into one massive pulse before burning out the system entirely. "Reynolds," she called, her voice weak. "Engine status. Online, Captain. Ready on your mark." Lyra positioned her finger over the overload control. "On my signal. Now." As Reynolds engaged the engines, pushing the Aegis away from the anomaly at maximum thrust, Lyra activated the overload sequence. Pain, like nothing she had ever experienced, ripped through her body as the beacon drew energy directly from her nervous system, amplifying her heartbeat to impossible levels. The sound filled the room, filled the ship, a primal human rhythm broadcast at a frequency that tore through the entity's coherence. The blue light surrounding her convulsed, violently contracting in on itself like a wounded animal. The possessed crew members at the door collapsed as puppets with cut strings. Through the viewport, Lyra could see the entity's manifestation throughout the ship, flowing outward, expelled by the overwhelming pulse of human biorhythm, retreating toward the anomaly and the ancient structure hidden within it. And then darkness. The emergency lighting in the medical bay cast harsh shadows across Lyra's face as she gradually regained consciousness. Her body felt leaden, every heartbeat a labored effort, but she was alive. Dr. Nakamura stood over her, checking readings on a medical scanner. The doctor herself looked haggard, with a bandage covering one side of her face, where the entity had struck her. "Welcome back, Captain," she said, relief evident in her tired smile. "For a while there, we weren't sure you'd make it." Lyra tried to speak, found her throat painfully dry, and accepted the water that Dr. Nakamura offered before trying again. "The ship, the crew, the Aegis took a beating, but she's holding together. Reynolds is performing miracles in engineering." Dr. Nakamura's expression sobered. "We lost 12 crew members, Captain. 5 killed in structural collapses during the attack. 7. The entity had progressed too far in its synchronization. When you broadcast that final pulse, their neural systems couldn't handle the shock." Lyra closed her eyes, absorbing the loss. 12 souls under her command gone. It could have been all of them, but that was cold comfort to a captain who valued every life aboard her vessel. "Kepler?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Dr. Nakamura shook her head. "No sign of him. We believe he was the first to be fully integrated with the entity. When it retreated, it took him with it," Lyra finished grimly. "Captain!" Malik's voice came from the doorway. He looked as exhausted as the rest of them, but there was a newfound respect in his eyes as he regarded her. "Good to see you conscious. Status report, Major. We're approximately 16 light hours from the anomaly, now continuing to put distance between us and the void at best possible speed," Malik reported. "Most major systems are back online, though communications and long-range sensors are still spotty. The entity, no sign of pursuit. The last sensor readings before we lost contact showed it retreating back into the anomaly. The signal has stopped completely." Lyra nodded, trying to process everything. "I need to see the bridge." Both Dr. Nakamura and Malik started to object, but something in Lyra's expression must have convinced them it would be futile. Instead, they helped her to a sitting position, then to stand, her legs trembling with weakness, but still supporting her. The journey to the bridge was slow and painful, but Lyra insisted on making it under her own power. A captain needed to show strength, especially after a crisis of this magnitude. The bridge itself was a shadow of its former efficiency. Several stations were dark, others manned by officers clearly operating on minimal rest. But it was functioning, the view screen showing the star-flecked vacuum ahead, normal space blessedly empty of blue light or geometric constructs. "Captain on the bridge," someone announced, and those who could rose to attention. "As you were," Lyra said immediately, making her way carefully to her command chair. "Status of the Alliance communication relay." "Oh, still offline, Captain," Communications Officer Morgan reported. "But we've prepared a complete data package for transmission as soon as we're in range. Full sensor logs, crew reports, and a formal warning about the void and the entity within it." "Good," Lyra approved. "They need to know what's out there, what's waiting." As the crew returned to their duties, Malik took the seat beside her, speaking quietly. "The Alliance will want explanations, Captain. We violated protocols regarding the void." "And I'll give them explanations," Lyra replied evenly, "along with the recommendation that they establish a permanent monitoring station at a safe distance. That thing, whatever it is, has been trapped in the void for who knows how long. Our presence woke it up, and I doubt it's going back to sleep anytime soon." "You think it will try again to escape to take other ships?" Lyra's expression was grim. "I think entities that ancient and powerful don't give up easily. It learned from us, Malik, adapted to our technology, our biology. Next time it will be better prepared." "And so will we," Malik asserted, unexpected conviction in his voice. Lyra managed a small smile at that. "Yes, Major, so will we." The journey back to Alliance space took 3 weeks, with the Aegis limping on damaged engines and the crew working around the clock to maintain essential systems. During that time, Lyra spent many hours in her quarters recording her personal log, a more detailed introspective account to complement the official report. "The fear never really leaves," she dictated, during one such session, staring out at the stars streaking past her viewport. "Not because of what we faced, but because of what it represents. In all our exploration, all our expansion across the galaxy, we've operated under the assumption that we were the dominant intelligence, that the universe was ours to categorize and colonize." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "But the void entity showed us something different, a life form so unlike our own that communication was nearly impossible, comprehension even more so. And it was old. Older than human civilization, perhaps, older than Earth itself. Waiting in that empty sector of space, dormant, until we came along with our broadcasts and beacons." Another pause, longer this time. "What else is out there waiting? What other ancient intelligences might we wake as we push further into the galaxy? And how will we face them when our technology, our very biology, is so alien to theirs that conflict seems inevitable?" She had no answers to these questions, only the determination that had brought her through the crisis to protect her crew, her ship, and the wider human society they represented. On the final night before they reached the Alliance outpost, where they would transfer for debriefing and medical evaluation, Lyra returned to the observation deck where this journey had begun. The false sense of normality from the artificial gravity felt different now. Not a comfort, but a reminder of how humans carried their bubbles of Earth-like conditions into the vastness of space, imposing familiarity on the unfamiliar. As she stood there contemplating the stars, her communicator chimed softly. The sound startled her from her reverie. "Captain," came Reynolds's voice, "you might want to see this. We're picking up something on the long-range sensors." "I'll be right there." The bridge was quiet when she arrived, the night shift monitoring stations with practiced efficiency. Reynolds stood at the sensor controls, his expression troubled. "What is it, engineer?" Lyra asked, moving to his side. "A signal, Captain. Very faint, very distant, coming from—" He hesitated before finishing, "the direction of the void." Lyra felt a chill run through her. "On screen." The pattern that appeared was nothing like the pulsing, rhythmic broadcast that had lured them before. This was subtle, almost subliminal, a whisper rather than a shout. But it was there, unmistakably artificial, unmistakably directed. "Is it the same entity?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Reynolds nodded. "Different pattern, but the same energy signature. It's changed its approach, but it's definitely the same source." Lyra studied the signal, noting its careful modulation, its near invisibility to standard scans. This wasn't a lure for passing ships. This was something else, a message perhaps, or a warning. Or a promise. "Log it," she ordered. "Add it to the data package for Alliance Command. They need to know that the entity isn't dormant anymore." She paused, her gaze fixed on the subtle undulations of the signal. And it's learning. As the Aegis continued its journey homeward, the signal remained on the edge of their sensors, constant, patient watching. A reminder that the void between stars was not empty after all, and that humanity's place in the cosmos was perhaps more precarious than they had ever realized. In her quarters, later completing her final log entry before arrival at the outpost, Lyra spoke the words that would conclude her official report. "We ventured to the edge of known space, drawn by what we thought was a call for help. What we found was something older and vaster than our understanding, an intelligence so alien that communication itself became a battlefield. We survived this time, but the entity remains waiting in its prison of darkness, and now it knows we exist." She paused, considering whether to continue, then added, "The void has never been empty. It has been watching, learning, waiting. And when we broadcast our presence across the stars, we should not be surprised when something answers something that may not share our definition of rescue or of life itself." With that final thought, Captain Lyra Vega of the USS Aegis closed her log and turned her gaze once more to the stars beyond her viewport, each one a potential harbor for mysteries and dangers as profound as what they had encountered at the edge of the void. And despite everything, despite the terror and loss, she felt the familiar stirring of curiosity, of determination. The universe was vaster and stranger than humanity had imagined. But they would face it together, armed with the knowledge they had purchased at such cost, and the unity they had forged in the crucible of crisis. The emergency signal had blazed, and what had arrived had indeed drowned the void in terror. But they had survived to tell the tale, and in the telling perhaps lay the key to humanity's future among the stars.